B. RSiphiwe Tshabalala, South African footballer, South Africa 2010. Even the Bears are playing vuvuzelas at this summer's FIFA World Cup in Russia. It was the South Africa World Cup finals 8 years ago that gave us the loud, monotone-note horn instrument after their international introduction as the previous year's Confederations Cup. Siphiwe Tshabalala, or Shabba, as he's known, is the South African footballer who scored the opening goal in the 2010 World Cup finals, a worldie that was shortlisted for that year's FIFA Puskas Award alongside nominations from players like Lionel Messi and Neymar Jr. The funniest thing for us during the 2010 World Cup was the vuvuzelas, Tshabalala says. People didn't really know what to make of vuvuzelas, what they were for. They felt they made too much noise, that they caused a problem for players to focus. To us, we were used to vuvuzelas. They motivated us. When fans started blowing those vuvuzelas, we knew that, it's on now. They brought hype. It was important for us to teach other countries our culture, of how we did things here. Most fans loved vuvuzelas. Some didn't. The important thing was to show the world, this is how we do things, and this is your opportunity to learn about other cultures as well. The World Cup gripped South Africa like a fever. 2 days before the tournament started, some players from the South Africa team were told they were going on a parade through Johannesburg. Initially we were told we should expect about 10,000 to 15,000 people, Tshabalala says. According to Goal.com, about 185,000 screaming fans lined the streets, as 6 or 7 of the team's players snaked their way through the crowds onto open-top buses. Just as we were about to leave our hotel, we heard a lot of noise out on the streets. Too much noise, Tshabalala says. There were a lot of people out there. People gathered on the streets and on every corner to wish us luck. We had to go there and show our appreciation, and honor it. It was amazing to hear all the vuvuzelas and horns. At first, our manager, Carlos Alberto Pereira, was not happy about it. He thought players now need to rest and start preparing for the first game against Mexico. On the other hand, he knew that the people wanted to see the team. The people wanted to wish the team the best of luck, and it was the only opportunity many of them had. The country's former president, then 91-year-old Nelson Mandela, was one of the team's biggest fans. He met the squad a week before the tournament started. He wore a team jersey with the captain's name, Aaron McQuaina, on the back of it. The team watched the film Invictus, the inspirational film starring Morgan Freeman about Mandela and the post-apartheid build-up to the 1995 Rugby World Cup final. A couple of days before the Mexico game, Tshabalala watched it again, alone, the day before the match. It was very, very special meeting Madiba, Mandela's clan name, because Madiba is one of the great men in the history of South Africa, Tshabalala said. He's celebrated worldwide. He's still an icon. We went there to visit him, just to get words of encouragement, best wishes and wisdom from the old man. He told us he was rooting for Bafana Bafana, the Zulu nickname for the team, which means the boys. The boys. South Africa's match against Mexico was played at FNB Stadium, also known as the Calabash, the site at which Mandela made his first speech after being released from decades of imprisonment in 1990. Tshabalala remembers he was surprised when they left the team hotel for the stadium. It took about 7 minutes to join the motorway. The streets were practically empty. There was no one about. There were hardly any cars on the motorway. It was like a ghost town, he says. Funeral quiet. All that could be heard were the police sirens chaperoning the team coach. The players started singing together on the bus. Just as we approached the stadium, all of a sudden from nobody around there were huge crowds, Tshabalala says. Huge traffic. That's when we felt it. Wow, our people are here. They were cheering left, right and center. It's time. Tshabalala and his teammates enjoy his goal. Luca Bruno, Associated Press. South Africa struggled in the first half, but 10 minutes into the second half, Tshabalala struck. South Africa slalomed through Mexico's defense with a counterattack from deep in their own half. The ball was fed to Tshabalala, who was herring up the left wing. He took one touch to control it, and then, boom! The ball flashed into the top corner of the net. The bleeding sound of vuvuzelas was unleashed around the stadium. Tshabalala sauntered over to the corner flag to dance in celebration with 4 of his teammates. It was premeditated, he says. The dance was practiced during our training sessions. I'm going to score, and this is the dance. It's not something that came out of nowhere. The confidence was there. I believed that I was going to score, and I believed that I was going to have a good tournament because I prepared very well. I was in the right frame of mind. When it was announced years earlier that South Africa was going to host the World Cup, I said to myself, I'm going to be part of that squad, and it happened. Mexico equalized late on. South Africa beat France, the 2006 FIFA World Cup finalists, but lost to Uruguay in their other group game, and there ended their World Cup adventure. Tshabalala, who grew up in his grandparents' house and its outlying rooms along with his parents, uncles, aunts and cousins in a township in Soweto, and who is still playing for Kaizer Chiefs in South Africa's Premier Division, will be remembered for the rest of his days because of that wonder goal. It changed my life, Tshabalala says. I get recognition everywhere, not just recognition but respect and love. I get messages almost every day, from fans all over the world, especially on Instagram. Still today, there are those football pages where fans post videos like, what is your best moment in football history? And people will tag me, saying, Tshabalala's goal against Mexico. I get fans letters from Asia, Europe, USA, everywhere, appreciating what I've done. Kevin Sheedy, Republic of Ireland footballer, Italy 1990. Kevin Sheedy scoring one of the most famous goals in Irish football history. Independent News and Media, Getty Images. When the Republic of Ireland team returned from the finals of the 1990 FIFA World Cup, about 300,000 people, which was almost a tenth of the country's 3.5 million population at the time, lined the streets of its capital, Dublin, to cheer them on. Earlier that day, Nelson Mandela had been given the freedom of the city. "Ooh-ah, Paul McGrath's DA," chanted the Irish fans in Dublin's College Green, where a stand had been erected to present the players. "I say ooh-ah, Paul McGrath's DA," they roared in appreciation for their Dublin-born, black centre-half. Ireland's World Cup odyssey began when it played England on a greasy night in Colliery. Things went awry for Irish fans when, after 8 minutes, England's Gary Lineker scored a pokey little goal, like something you'd see on a curling rink. He seemed, in the words of Irish novelist Roddy Doyle, to whack it in with his scooter and crawl after it into the net. 2/3 of the way through the second half, Ireland snatched an equaliser from its left-sided Everton midfielder. Kevin Sheedy, an ex-Liverpool player, lost control of the ball to England's Steve McMahon, an ex-Everton player then on the books at Everton's cross-city rivals, Liverpool, only to regain possession again. It was a curious little dance before Sheedy finished expertly into the corner. "I remember I got the ball," Sheedy says. "I tried to make a pass, but Steve McMahon cut it out. He'd just come on as a sub. He was a little bit cold, not up to the pace of the game, and he failed to control it. I reacted quickly to it, and it came to my left foot, and I hit it. As soon as it left my boot, from years of doing it, I knew it was in. I caught it as sweet as I could." I think that more or less finished his international career. He was just unfortunate, but fortunate for me that he made the mistake and I was able to capitalize on it. Sheedy spent a decade with Everton, winning a clutch of medals, including 2 league titles and a European Cup Winners' Cup in 1985. His father was from Dara, a small village in the west of Ireland, but Sheedy grew up in Hereford, England, where the family ran a pub called the Tram Inn. He was part of a brigade of second-generation Irish players from Ireland's diaspora who made up half of the Republic of Ireland team, getting in under what was known as the granny rule. To Irish fans, though, Sheedy was more Irish than the Irish themselves, the scorer of the Republic of Ireland's first ever goal in a World Cup finals. "I think it was a brilliant match. Only for Kevin Sheedy we wouldn't have won," gushed a female fan, ensconced in a pub, on Irish national TV after the match against England finished in a draw, 1-1. Ireland drew its other 2 group games, against Egypt and the Netherlands, but it was enough to get them into the knockout stages. In its last 16 tie against Romania, the Irish team played out another boring draw, 0-0, after 120 minutes of play, so it went to penalties. For the penalty shootout, Jack Charlton, Ireland's manager, was going around looking for who was going to take a penalty, and I said I would take the first one, Sheedy says. I had about 10 minutes, from the final whistle, to wait. It is a long time, and you have the long walk up. My parents were in the stand, so it was a case of not letting them down as well. I decided I was going to hit it down the middle, hard and high. Usually, I'm thinking, the first penalty, the goalkeeper will have to dive. He's not gonna just stand there and let me roll it into a corner. The reason for it being high was that if he did dive, then he leaves his legs there. Then he can save it with his legs. I went for power, hit it cleanly, and it went in. Both teams continued to score until the 5th round of penalties. The Irish goalkeeper Paddy Bonner saved Romania's Daniel Timof's effort. Ireland's substitute David O'Leary then scored the goal that sent the Irish team through to the quarter-finals. The unlucky Timof did, however, manage to salvage something from the debacle. He later opened a bar in Petrosani called Penalty. World Cup mania transformed the island country of Ireland over the month of the tournament. The bars were packed for its team's matches, with fans wielding giant, inflatable bananas. Supporters cashed in insurance policies to travel to Italy for games. The predominantly Irish team even had an audience with Pope John Paul II, decked out in their green and white tracksuits. It seemed a bit premature. You didn't see Italy, the hosts, and Ireland's opponents in the quarter-finals, scrambling to meet Papa. Sure enough, the Irish team went down 1-0 to Italy in Rome's Olympic Stadium, following a goal by Salvatore "Toto" Schillaci, winner of both the tournament's Golden Boot and Golden Ball awards. Sheedy's abiding memory is how tenacious Giuseppe Bergomi, Italy's captain and a World Cup winner in 1982, was in defense and a sense of what might have been. The right-back Bergomi marked me tighter and closer than anyone ever did, he says. I couldn't move. He was by far the hardest opponent I played against in my career. Whenever you were in a position to get the ball, he'd be there. We were obviously disappointed to lose because we'd gone close. When you look a bit further, Italy had Argentina in the semi-finals. Obviously they still had Diego Maradona, but they weren't the force that they were. We'd probably done as well as what we could have done, but when you get that close you still feel maybe. Brian Glanville, English journalist, Sweden, 1958. Much has been made about boredom being the enemy of team camps at the 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia. During the 1958 tournament in Sweden, the Russian players took off fishing to distract their minds in between games. It was a momentous time for Brian Glanville, a doyen of football writing, as it was the first World Cup finals he covered. Glanville's main employer, the Observer newspaper in England, sent another journalist to cover the tournament, so Glanville organised a deal with a rival paper, the Sunday Times, at a rate of £20 an article, no expenses. The Observer were unhappy with that and didn't allow him use his byline at the tournament, so his articles were published under his second name, Brian Lester. The competition was unrecognizable from the month-long jamboree in Russia this summer, which has thousands of accredited journalists covering the matches. Glanville was one of a select band of international reporters to cover it. He had enviable access to players and coaches and went on one memorable drinking session with 5 of the Wales team on the night after they had been unluckily eliminated from the tournament in the quarter-finals by Brazil, 1-0. A 17-year-old Pelé in action against Wales at the 1958 World Cup. Staff, Getty Images. The England team stayed in the Park Avenue Hotel in the middle of Gothenburg. Glanville remembers Bobby Charlton, England's 20-year-old attacking midfield genius, only once telling a joke. It was in the lounge of the hotel, and it was about a bus queue in the northeast of England, where Charlton grew up. A man in the queue, who was unable to get on the bus, asked, "How long will the next bus be?" The bus conductor replied, "About as long as this one." Charlton had reason to be morose. His coach, Walter Winterbottom, unaccountably never played him in the tournament. It was still only a few months from the Munich air disaster that killed 8 of his Manchester United teammates in a plane crash, including the spine of the England national team. Charlton had been torpedoed out of the airplane strapped to his seat, but they survived. The tragedy hung over the England camp and the English public's expectations like a pall. The Manchester United air crash, Glanville says, in which we lost 3 of our players, Duncan Edwards, above all, Roger Byrne, and Tommy Taylor were all killed, resulting in 3 of our best players being immediately removed. England went there, and they were also too light. Only 20 traveled, when you were allowed to bring 22 players. They could have brought 2 other players, including Nat Lofthouse, whom they left behind, their best centre-forward, which was ridiculous. England also left Stanley Matthews at home, and Tom Finney, another of their world-class players, got injured. The team lost to Russia 1-0 in a group game playoff. It was the only time that 4 nations from the British Isles qualified for the finals. Scotland finished bottom of their group, but Northern Ireland and Wales progressed to the quarter-finals. In the days before private team jets, Northern Ireland submitted their squad to a 210-mile coach ride the day before they met France in their quarter-finals tie, losing 4-0, half the goals coming from exhaustion, half because of the genius of France's Moroccan-born centre-forward Just Fontaine, who scored a brace in the match and finished the tournament with 13 goals, which is still a record per FIFA. Wales had the misfortune to lose their Galactico striker, the hulking John Charles, to injury for their match against Brazil, in which a 17-year-old Pelé scored the game's only goal, one which, according to Glanville, Pelé has claimed was the most important of his career, as Wales proved a tough nut to crack. The Wales goalkeeper, Jack Kelsey, had been imperious. It took a deflection for Pelé's goal to get past him. After the game, Glanville congratulated Kelsey on his handling. Chewing gum, he replied. Always use it. Put some on my hands. Rub it well in. There were many newfangled innovations at the tournament. Brazil, who are not normally known for their defensiveness, unveiled the 4-2-4 formation to the world for the first time, forsaking the traditional 3 at the back that other teams used to favor at the time. Brazil also brought a team psychologist with them. He wore grey sweaters, spectacles and went about unfashionably unshaven, what would be known as designer stubble today. He saw footballers as coming from 2 camps, they were either instinctive or intellectual. To find out where they fell, he encouraged his players to draw pictures of a footballer. Those who were instinctive, he argued, drew matchstick men, while those who were cerebral sketched more elaborate drawings. He believed defenders should contain their aggression and that attackers should unleash it. Brazil's team coach, Vicente Fiale, wasn't an admirer of his psychologist's mind games. When Fiala was asked about the work of the psychologist in a press conference, the interpreter, much in the way that Jose Mourinho used to adjust Bobby Robson's instructions when he worked as his translator in the 1990s, responded with his own interpretation of Fiala's feelings. Senhor Fiala is not saying that he wishes the psychologist would go to hell, but he is thinking it. Something worked, however, because Brazil went on to win the tournament, defeating Sweden in a thrilling final 5-2 to claim their first World Cup title. Sweden had taken the lead, but Brazil came back to win handsomely. Pelé scored 2 goals, including an unforgettable circus-type goal in the box. He trapped a cross on his chest, scooped it over an on-rushing defender and volleyed past Sweden's goalkeeper. Glanville returned to London after the World Cup and fulfilled a long-held ambition in securing a full-time job as a football correspondent for the Sunday Times. Pelé did okay, too, going on to win a further 2 World Cup winners' medals, in 1962 and 1970. What Leo Messi wouldn't do for just one. All quotes and information obtained first-hand unless otherwise indicated. Follow Richard on Twitter, @RichardFitz.